that's where we're coming from with ripple effect images is, let's really shine a light on what's working. Let's really elevate and amplify the change makers that are getting it done. And they might be working at a relatively local level within their community right now, in the same way that in an organization, they might be working just within their team. But if you can find ways to ripple that out, you can find ways to replicate what's working, then you can see a real shift in performance.
Hi, and welcome to Helping People Perform, the podcast that gives you fascinating insights into those people whose chosen vocation is to help others perform at their best. From consultants to teachers, sports coaches to financial advisors, all of my guests share a passion for getting the most out of individuals, teams, and organisations. Enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Helping People Perform podcast. Delighted to be joined today, all the way from Virginia, over in the States. We have Executive Director at Ripple Effect Images. Welcome to the show, Liz Bloomfield. Welcome, Liz.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. And I think we've got some amazingly interesting topics to cover off as we talk today about what you do and how you do it. But before we get into that, can we just talk a little bit about your background in terms of what got you to where you are today?
Yeah, suffice to say, I've had quite a winding path in terms of my career. I started out in the British Army, spent about 8 years serving, including deployments overseas to Iraq and elsewhere. After I left the military, I worked for the police for a few years, the UK police force, as well as in the corporate sector for Siemens Wind Power in the renewable energy field. And then when I moved to the US about coming up for 10 years ago, I made another transition into the humanitarian sector, really motivated by my commitment to serving people who are facing really significant challenges in their life, following up on experiences that I'd had really early in my career during my time in the military. And so over the last 8 years or so, I've worked on the protection of civilians trapped in conflict situations. I've worked on supporting people who have been affected by natural disasters such as hurricanes and earthquakes. And I now lead Ripple Effect Images, which is a nonprofit focused on using visual storytelling. So that's photography, film, animation, graphic design, all different visual ways in which to communicate. And we do that to shine a light on solutions empowering women and children globally. What we're really conscious of is how many things there are out there that are working. And so I'm really fortunate in this more recent years in my career to be able to work with a fabulous team of storytellers and engage with change makers across the globe to shine a light on just what's going well out there so that we can attract more attention and those solutions can be replicated.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful stuff, and I'd love to learn a lot more about some of these specific examples in there, but I just wanted to follow up a little bit on those early days. You talk about the military, you talk about the police. What are some of the key lessons that you took from those environments, both in terms of what you've brought through your career and maybe one or two things that you might have gladly left behind?
Yeah, I think I had some incredible experiences during my early career for which I'm really grateful for. When I was in Iraq, I was really privileged to serve alongside local Iraqi civilians as we worked to reestablish the rail infrastructure in southern Iraq. Okay. And it was a really interesting few months because culturally, there was the potential for there to be real challenges in us working together. As a woman, my chain of command were very mindful that it might actually be impossible for us to overcome some of those cultural barriers. But the reality was quite to the contrary. And actually, the fact that I was female actually opened some doors in our collaboration that just wouldn't have been possible in any other circumstances. And so I think that really sowed a seed for me around thinking about looking at situations in a different way, not assuming that a certain set of circumstances is going to result in a particular outcome, but really being curious, being open-minded and looking for the common ground
Right.
looking for the fact that although you might appear to be from very different worlds, actually as humans, there's so many things that unite us. And so I think was something that I learned really early on in my career. And I've carried that right through. And
Mm.
it's really been something that's really continues to motivate me, to focus me, to help me understand how to overcome difficult situations and how to perform it
Mm.
under pressure. And so I think that's probably the second one
Yeah.
is around, understanding your own capacity.
Right.
And I think it's, I think that's where early in my career, having opportunities to work in very arduous situations, but with a really fabulous support network,
Mm.
it really helped me understand how much I was capable of,
Mm.
but also how important it is that we rely on the people around us, that we don't have to do everything ourselves.
Yep.
And that's something that, again, has really served me well as I've gone on in my career.
Mm. Yeah. It's a story that we've had a couple of people who've been in the armed forces in one way or another, and a good friend of mine, Jimmy Burrows, who was in I think episode 10 of this. He's from an army background. He talks a lot about that imposter syndrome in the early stages of walking into those battleground areas or real war zones, and the responsibility that's on you. But actually, it's the support network, the team element of everybody coming together in order to perform and support each other, wanting to get that performance outcome. It comes across strongly in all the stories I've heard in the from
Right.
the armed forces. It's sounding like that's a very similar feeling that you've had in your past.
Yeah, completely. And I think in the armed forces, it's very intentional. It's something that you are aware of from the very moment that you join up, and
Right.
you experience it throughout your training. And so it's really never in any doubt. And I think that's something that you learn to really value. And I think it's something that people really miss when they
Mm.
leave the armed forces. But equally, I think it's something that can be replicated in other settings. It just requires a real sense of purpose and intent in doing that. And
Yeah.
it requires a vigilance to continuing to maintain those practices that enable that trust to prosper. It doesn't happen automatically. You
Mm.
can't just assume that that kind of environment is going to suddenly materialize because you want it to.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, we can all as individuals reflect on our own daily practices, how we're showing up as a leader, how we're showing up as a follower, how
Mm.
we're helping create spaces for people to do their best work. But that's something that we need to do every day, and it's something that we need to be continually learning about and responding to, and admitting that we don't have all the answers. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for leaders, is that there's an unwritten assumption, or maybe in some contexts it is written, but there's this assumption that leaders need to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And actually the very best leaders, from my perspective, are the ones that admit that they don't.
Mm.
They're really excellent listeners,
Yeah.
not just going through the motions, but actually really actively listening and creating the space for people to bring their best ideas.
Mm.
But then they also have the humility to to elevate those people that are coming up with answers, not having to present every answer as their own. And I think
Mm.
that's where the leaders that have inspired me the most are the ones that have had that humility to really bring the whole team into the situation. And again, that's something that some of my experiences in the humanitarian sector really taught me a lot. I had a real light bulb moment once sitting barefoot on the floor of a community center in rural Myanmar. No shoes on,
Mm.
so no business suits, no PowerPoint presentations, but just sitting on the floor with local women as we discussed some of the challenges around ensuring the safety of their families during the ongoing conflict. And it was just so fascinating to me because whilst none of these women held any kind of formal title as a leader, they were clearly the leaders within their
Right.
community, and they clearly had answers. They knew what they needed to keep their communities safe. The challenge was that nobody was listening,
Right.
certainly not on an international level. And I think as I reflect on how we become more effective as individuals, as organizations, whether that's on a kind of micro community, organizational or global level, it all comes back to listening. And we hear that term so much. And I think if you asked anybody if they were a good listener, I would say 99% of them would say yes. And yet the reality is that not many of us are, and I include myself in that. It's something that I'm really committed to be better at. But I think that's where we again have to really reflect on our own practice. What is it that we're doing? So much of the time we are thinking about what we're going to say next, how we're going to respond to what somebody has said. And some of the most transformative leadership and performance spaces, from my perspective, are the ones where there's this real commitment to listening, right. This real commitment to making the space, not passing judgment immediately, but making the space for people to be able to verbalize their ideas or their challenges or their proposed solutions, whatever it might be. But that's, I think, a practice where the most progressive organizations and the most progressive leaders are really doing things differently.
I've reflected a number of times, having worked in the consultancy world a while. It's I found it quite frustrating at times that all I was doing was relaying the answers that were already in the organization up the chain, and they were better answers because they'd been paid for. And it's like, just speak to your people, the answers are there. And that's, there's a lesson there, but also there's a value in connecting those two areas as well. So it's like, do you want people to talk to each other directly, but if they're not, then there is value in helping them to connect through some medium or other, isn't there?
Yeah.
Go on.
No, it's just, I think one of the things also that really stands out to me in the work that I do with Ripple Effect Images is focusing attention on solutions. And when I think at a global scale, when you think about the news headlines that we read and the content that we consume, such a huge part of it is dominated by problems, challenges, victims, difficulties. And the reality is, what we've seen from our travels around the world, by being out in the community in all different parts of the globe, is that there's so many things that are going well, so many things that are working, they just don't get the attention. And so, whether you're a small business, whether you're a large corporation, whether you're a non-profit, or whether you're a social enterprise, if you're a school, if you're a healthcare provider, in all of those spaces, there's things that are going well. And I think if you can find ways in which to shine a light on what's working and make that the magnet for your time and your effort and your attention and your energy, then that's where you can have a ripple effect. That's where you can ripple out those solutions rather than allowing the problems to just suck away all of your energy and resources. And so that's that's where we're coming from with Ripple Effect Images is let's really shine a light on what's working. Let's really elevate and amplify the change makers that are getting it done. And they might be working at a relatively local level within their community right now, in the same way that in an organization, they might be working just within their team.
Yeah.
But if you can find ways to ripple that out, you can find ways to replicate what's working, then you can see a real shift in performance.
Yeah. That scaling of success is a critical one, isn't it? Yeah, I know. I've certainly been involved in a lot of that. One of the key lessons I got from my time at McLaren was that focus on what's working well. If you understand what's working well, you can do more of it, and you can do that. And I often like to start any kind of session, particularly reflection sessions or retrospectives and things like that from an organisation I'm working with. It's like, what's worked well? Let's focus on that first. Let's be positive, because there's such an intrinsic element to us in terms of what's happened that we didn't plan for, what went badly, how have things gone wrong. It's actually, let's focus on the good stuff, and we want to get rid of the bad stuff, but let's focus on the good stuff so we don't design it out and we scale it up.
Right. And you're creating those learning environments where the energy is being channeled in the right way. If a learning environment is focused only on learning from mistakes, then it just brings a different kind of energy. But if a learning environment can still learn from those mistakes, but can channel that towards how that is, amplifying and elevating the solutions, then that has the potential to generate, even more positive outcomes.
Brilliant. So let's hear a little bit more about ripple effect then, in terms of who's it helping, how do you help them. If anybody's watching this on the YouTube channel, you'll see the photo behind Liz there. The power of images seems to be the thing that you're really grasping onto, isn't it?
Yeah, Ripple was established, it was founded about 12 years ago by Annie Griffiths, who is a really accomplished National Geographic photographer who has photographed all across the globe. And she really, really is incredibly talented. But what she noticed as she was moving around the world is exactly what I just described, is that how many of the women were the change makers within their community who were coming up with ways to overcome the day-to-day challenges that they faced, whether that related to healthcare, whether that was education, it could be economic empowerment, water and sanitation. In all different areas, they were really driving solutions, and they were paying it forward to their community. If you investment in one woman, she would pay it forward to her family, her community, and so it continues. And Annie got together a number of her National Geographic colleagues, and over the past 12 years or so, Ripple's really been shining a light on exactly those women that are out there in parts of the globe that are really getting it done. And by creating content to elevate and amplify these solutions, it attracts resources so that those programs can be replicated, they can maybe be expanded, or they could be replicated in another part of the world and have a ripple effect. And that's exactly what we've continued to do. Today, we're really working on how we can reach even wider audiences. One of the things that we're really mindful at Ripple is it's one thing telling a story to people who are already completely sold on the issue. But if we can find ways to reach people in other spaces, people that perhaps aren't aware of some of the challenges that we're shining a light on, if we can reach those people, then we really have the potential to make a difference. And that's what we're doing. Last year, Ripple's latest film, Mapping Survival, was recognized at a number of film festivals across the globe. We got our content in front of much wider audiences, and we're really seeing how that is having an impact on the work that we do, on the work that our partners do. If we've got a moment, I can transport you to Chad, where the film was set, and Hindu Umaru Ibrahim, who's a perfect example of the kind of change makers that I was describing earlier. She's a nomadic woman from Chad who, against the odds, got an education and now brings together her indigenous knowledge along with kind of technical knowledge to use 3D mapping to map water sources in rural Chad. Water scarcity is a huge challenge in that part of the world. And Hindu's just an incredible example of how she's bringing together different types of knowledge, indigenous knowledge, technical knowledge, to solve a very real problem for her community, for her country, for the region. And the film has enabled Hindu to reach so much wider an audience with her message. She's really quite an extraordinary person, and we feel so lucky to have worked with her. But it's just an example of what can happen if you can reach people with stories of solutions.
And as you say, the problems that are being faced aren't just for Chad in that region in Chad. Lack of water or being able to find and resource that water is it's a global issue, isn't it? So if you can have that ripple effect and scale, it doesn't have to be the exact solution either, does it? It's the learnings, the approach, maybe some of the technologies that can be adapted and then adopted.
Exactly. It has a very kind of practical level to it. And in the work that we do here at Ripple, sometimes we're telling stories that enable a nonprofit or an organization to reach wider audiences in order to mobilize resources.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about advocacy and reaching more people with a particular message. It really depends on the organization and their objective. But at the heart of all of it is storytelling. And I
Right.
think that's something for me when it comes to performance
Mm.
that I'm deeply passionate about.
Yeah.
So the work that I do with Ripple is focused on using storytelling to enable change makers and nonprofit organizations to reach wider audiences with their story. But I also support a number of individuals in terms of reframing their internal story, their internal narrative to better serve themselves. We all tell ourselves stories every single day from the moment we wake up. We're telling ourselves a story. We have a narrative running in our head.
Mm.
And then we are looking at the world around us, trying to find evidence points to back up our story. But sometimes that story is just not serving us.
Right.
Sometimes that story is based on something that's happened in the past. Sometimes it's based on something that we think we aspire to in the future. And so all of that storytelling that's going on all the time can really impact people. And so another way in which I seek to serve people in the world is helping them understand their story and helping them reconnect with the difference that they want to make in the world, enabling them to ensure they're channeling their energy in a way that aligns with that and ensures that they can maintain their own well-being so that they can increase their impact even further. What I've seen over and over again is that people who are very purpose driven, often people who are in caring professions, whether that's healthcare, education, humanitarian, military,
Yeah.
and then alongside that, maybe a parent or a carer for an elderly relative, people who work in those kind of roles day in, day out, sometimes at the detriment of their own well-being.
Yeah.
And that can really have an impact on their performance and their ability to continue to have the impact that they want to have in the world. And so it just becomes a downward spiral. And so the work that I do with some of the people that I coach is around how can we rework that story so that it serves you better, so that you can continue to have the impact that you want to have in the world, but also you can do that in a way that your own well-being is maintained and your energy levels are high.
Yeah.
So that's another part of what I do, which I absolutely love because I feel such a strong alignment with people who work in service of others, and I think they're people that need particular support to ensure that they're not doing that to the detriment of their own well-being.
Definitely. I mean, it's been a common theme in some of the conversations we've had, and one that my next question looks to probe into a little bit, which is how do you help your own performance? Where do you go to make sure that you have your cup filled and don't expend all that energy there? Who do you go to, or what do you do to help yourself perform?
Absolutely. And this is something I've been more intentional about as I've got older. When I was in my 20s and probably my early 30s, I had a mindset of, I just need to do more. I need to work harder. I need to connect with more people. I need to put more hours in, more. And at some point, I realized that just wasn't sustainable. And now I'm much more intentional about it. I have 3 coaches right now for different things. I'm working on growing Ripple as a nonprofit. I have a coach that's helping me there. There are other elements of my life where coaches are supporting me. And so I think just having that outside perspective, having someone who can just challenge you to get behind your own decision making, like what's driving the decisions that you're making and what's driving the behaviors that are showing up for you on a daily basis. So I do believe in having those external people that can help hold you accountable. I also have a wonderful accountability partner that I meet with every Friday. We take a walk on the phone. She's in another state, and we talk about things. We hold each other accountable, and I think that weekly check-in is just a checkpoint that really works for me on a personal level. And then I think that the other area which you really can't underestimate is having having networks of people where you have a shared interest. I'm within a couple of networks, which means so much to me. They're support networks, they're people who share their own challenges, which brings a sense of community. I again, I think when I was earlier in my career, I didn't really feel like I needed that. I was like, I can do this all myself.
Yeah.
And as the years have gone by, I've really seen the value in those shared communities, those shared safe spaces.
Yeah.
And so those are people that I value enormously.
No. Yeah, I mean, I can certainly echo some of that, particularly as I've gone out to work on my own over the last couple of years, and it's thinking you can do it all yourself, and then you connect with certain people, and it's just like, wow, not only are people going through the same thing as you, but they can help you along the way, and people's generosity just comes through in those areas as well, doesn't it?
It really does. And I had such a wonderful experience last week. I'm part of a virtual expedition that's been underway for about 9 months now. Brings together 24 women from across the globe to find approaches to leadership that resonate with women, finding more inclusive approaches that really will be more appealing to a wider range of people that might not be drawn to current leadership models that perhaps aren't a good fit for everybody. But that was a great example of that shared community and making the time to listen and share and build that trust. These aren't things that can just, these aren't environments that can just come about in quite a quick 30-minute Zoom call.
Right.
They come about through a kind of consistent commitment to engaging with people, but also we're being willing to share. I think again at certain points during earlier in my career, I was less willing to be vulnerable, less willing to share my own challenges or mistakes or things that I wish that I'd done differently.
Yeah.
And because at that point in your career, you think you need to be invincible. You think you need to be the one that can do it all. But I've really noticed in this community and in other similar communities that I'm part of, is the real learning comes when people are willing to put themselves out there. They're willing to say, this was really hard, or this is where, I wish I'd done it differently. And that's where the magic happens. Yeah. And so I think if you want to be part of those communities, you've also got to be willing to be vulnerable yourself. And that doesn't always come easy to people, myself included, but it's something that I'm trying to learn.
Yeah, I can certainly echo on that one. So a couple of other questions then. If you could help any individual, team, organization, whatever that might be, with the skill set that you've got, who would you want that to be?
For me, it's always about supporting people who are seeking to make a difference in the world, people who have a solution, something that they are really committed to having a positive impact. It's those people, how I can help them as an organization through storytelling with ripple effect images, or as an individual through my social impact and well-being coaching. It's those people to say, you might be tired, this might be really hard, but here's some ways in which we can help you keep going, because the world needs you. And I think that's the challenge when things are hard, is sometimes it just feels like you can't carry on. You're just tired and you think, my only option here is to go do something else. But actually those are the people that I want to help, because those are the people that are really truly making a difference in the world, and I want to walk beside them in telling their story.
Yeah. And similarly, who would you like to sit down with, maybe have a coffee, have a drink or a meal, and so that you can learn from them?
I think my reply to this is going to be very biased by the week that I've just come back from. I mentioned that week, the group of women emerging virtual expedition of women, and we just spent a week together really doing a deep dive into what those inclusive approaches to leadership might look like. And that was it. That was the moment that I needed.
Right.
Just listening to people from all different sectors, all different walks of life, sharing their challenges, but also sharing their vision. And so I feel fortunate to say, well, I think, Paul, I had that conversation last week, and I'm feeling really energized. And I think it's that dynamic space where people could come together and have the time to speak. I think that's what we often are up against these days, is that some of it's real and some of it's perceived, but this constant need to do more, more, more in less, less, less time.
Yeah.
We're always feeling like we're facing the pressure of time, and that can really inhibit the meaningful work,
Right.
getting below the surface, bouncing ideas off each other, really listening. And so I think the luxury of time to have those conversations in a way that doesn't have to be kind of edited into sound bites. That's really precious.
Wonderful. So how do people find out more? Where do they go to find out more about Ripple Effect? How do they contact you?
Yeah, so you can find out all about Ripple at rippleeffectimages.org. There's beautiful films on there. You'll see all of the fabulous content that my team has created. You'll also find Ripple on Instagram. If you search for Ripple Effect Images, we have a very active Instagram account, and you can see more from all of our fabulous photographers, filmmakers. There's some beautiful content, so I would urge people to check it out. If people are interested in coaching, especially purpose-driven people who are facing challenges with their well-being, they can check out my website, which is liz-bloomfield.com. Find loads more there. Again, you'll also find me on Instagram and LinkedIn. Happy to help with anybody, especially for any kind of challenges that they have relating to storytelling.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure, as always, that those links are in the show notes so people can go there and find you. I've had a look at the Ripple Effect Images site, as you say, like some beautiful, heartbreaking at times, but also truly inspiring images that are in there as well. And I'm going to go back and have another look later, because it fills the cup occasionally. So let's carry on. Liz, really appreciate you coming on today. Thanks for your stories, and best of luck with all the great work that Ripple Effect is doing, and with your coaching as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. Have a
Thanks.
great day.
You too. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, then please give the podcast a rate, review and share. I'm Paul Teasdale, and from sausage making to banking, oil and gas to Formula One, I help people perform. If you'd like to find out more and have a conversation, contact me via helpingpeopleperform.com.